السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. Amma ba'd, we start in the name of Allah, the Most High, the one to whom belongs all praise, the one who controls all affairs, the one who gives, the one who takes, glorified and exalted is He. And we send peace and blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam and his family and his followers until the end of time. Ameen. I want to just share some, pun intended, simple reflections today around the idea of trying to keep things simple. And this is largely based off of a video that was going around, but also some of the experiences of the last couple weeks. As probably many of you know, we had some tragic deaths in the community, and of some beautiful young people, Yusuf and Rayhan and their son Omar, rahimahumullah. And what was amazing in the aftermath of that was hearing, like, one of the things I think about sometimes is how do we remember people after they're gone? You know, what do we say about them? And also, what does what we say about them reflect what matters to us too? Because it kind of goes both ways, right? Because people are very complicated. People have many different facets to their lives, many different qualities and attributes. So why would we pick particular ones, right? But then also, when you look at the aggregate of what do people remember about other people, you get an idea of kind of what floats to the top. Because if so many different people are noticing the same thing, then there's probably some sort of truth to it. So one of the things that was noticed about Yusuf and Rayhan in particular was that they were, and what we knew them personally, is that they were not really complicated people. They're very simple people. People who cared for Islam, they cared for Allah, they cared for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when it came to their relationships with people, their relationships are very simple also. Generally speaking, most people you talk to, they said every time we saw them, they brought happiness into the gathering. Every time we saw them, they didn't treat anyone bad. They always treated people well. They were always in the service of other people. They were always giving to other people. They're always there to support other people, and so on, right? And these really are the essential qualities of what a believer looks like in society, right? I mean, of course, we have our iman, and our iman will be part of how we deal with the public and everything else. But the main thing that's going to come out of that is how we deal with people from a tangible perspective, right? And so it just kind of got me thinking about what does it all mean in the end? You know, like all of the stuff that we're concerned with, all of the issues that we have, the things that we're worried about, the intellectual conundrums that we're dealing with, or whatever it might be. What is it all about in the end of the day? And what was very clear, I think, in that situation was that what it's about in the end of the day is just caring for people and loving people and being there for them and serving them and supporting them and believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and turning things over to Him, you know. And so that ties into this other thing that I saw that's been going around. It's a little bit, it's an interesting it's a short clip. Oprah's interviewing this lady named Elizabeth Gilbert. Some of you probably saw it. She's interviewing this lady and she asks her, what was a time in your life, essentially paraphrasing, what was a time in your life when you saw grace, like you experienced grace being offered to you? Rahmah, it's kind of similar to rahmah, but maybe a little bit different, but mercy and beauty and compassion. And when did you really see that? And she starts to tell this story about how she was going through this difficult time in her life, and during that time she went to this island in Indonesia. She said, I'm going to go to this island where nobody's around and I don't know anybody and I don't have anything there. And she rented like this little hut and she's staying in this hut, and she says, I'm going to stay here for 10 days. I'm not going to talk to anyone. I'm just going to walk around the island every single day, and I'm going to maintain silence until I can kind of like figure out what's going on with me. So she says, I'm walking around this island every day and I don't know anyone, but every time I get to this other side of the island, I see this old woman, old Muslim woman, who we don't know each other. She doesn't know me, I don't know her. And every time I walk past her, she puts her hand on her chest and she kind of just like gestures to her, right? And she keeps walking. And she said what happened in the middle of her stay there was that she became really ill, like very, very sick. And, you know, whatever it was. And she thought, you know, it's a very, who knows what's going to happen. And she's stuck in this hut. She's hurting and everything else. And she says when eventually this old woman comes to the door. You know, the old woman comes to the door of the hut and she sees the condition that she's in, and she tells her, I'll be back. She gestures to her that she'll be back, right? So she goes and then she comes back. And when she comes back, she has fresh water and she has food and all of this kind of stuff. And she gives it to her. And the woman starts crying because, like, who is this woman in the middle of this island that I have no idea who she is, and she doesn't know who I am, and she didn't see me when I was going around the island. She didn't see me, so she became worried. So she started to search until she found her, right? This is clearly what happened. So she finds her. She starts crying, and she says she held me, and she held me like she would hold her child. And I just cried with her and cried with her and cried with her, and she didn't even know her name. And she said, to me, this is a non-Muslim lady, she said, to me, that's the face of Islam. The face of Islam, no matter what anyone says, the face of Islam is that lady's face. And the way that she came to help her, and she came to serve her and support her, and so on. The reason why I think this is really profound is because this doesn't take a whole lot. You know, in a sense, I should be careful. It doesn't take a whole lot in terms of like knowledge that's being memorized or things that are being picked through or so on and so forth. It takes a whole lot in the heart. It takes like to really believe and to really care about the things that should be cared about, and to do them is not always as easy as it sounds, but it's a work of the heart of primarily. And it's an example of keeping things very simple. And one of the things that's really amazing, I think, about our religion and amazing about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the people that carried the example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam throughout the generations is that generally this is a quality that you'll see with them. You know, you see that because when you look at the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it was very straightforward. You know, you can go online now and find little replicas and models of his house, how was it, and stuff like that. It's very remarkable. You know, it's a small room. It's not really anything there. There's a bow, there's some arrows, there's a stick, there's a sword on the wall, and like a little place where you sleep. And that's basically the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, if someone invites him to come eat, he'll sit with them and come eat with them. If a woman in Medina told him she has some sort of issue, he would tell her, go anywhere in the city, sit down and find somewhere to sit, and I'll sit with you and we'll take care of your issue. They said if a slave invited him to share food with him, he would answer the invitation. The Prophet ﷺ was very simple. You know, he eat his food very simply. He lived his life very simply. His clothes was very simple. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, they put food in front of him, and there's like nothing there. It's like bread and vinegar. He said, oh, it's the vinegar, it's the best of dressings. It's the best thing to eat food with. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Because the focus is on the hereafter. So what are all these things in the end anyways? A little bit here, a little bit there. Sit on the ground, sit on the floor, sit on a table, don't sit on the table, sit on the couch, don't sit on the couch. You drive in the car, don't drive in the car, take a bike. All these things, like in the end, they're just modes of transportation. They're just things that we live in. And he, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, lived such a simple life that you see that as kind of like an imprint upon the Muslim peoples throughout the ages. And yet, at the same time, we have an extremely advanced scholarly tradition, which is really remarkable, right? Because this is a prophet who was unlettered and who was so simple, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But out of the dedication to understanding his way, then this beautiful scholarly tradition developed. And yet, you find, again, the scholars who are al-ulama, al-amilun, al-rabbaniyun, people who are like people of knowledge who practice that knowledge, you see over and over again that they're very simple. So there'll be someone like, if you were to, I apologize, if you were to pick up something that they wrote, it might be very difficult to read it. And if you sit in their presence, you have no indication of that. Like the intellectual output is so sophisticated that it's very difficult for you to read it. And yet you sit with the person is totally relaxed, laid back. It reminds me of there is one brother, Sheikh, that used to teach in Al-Azhar Masjid when we were in Egypt. I don't know what happened to him, but Allah preserve him. If you look him up on the internet, you can find a little incident that happened before he left Egypt. Allah protect him. I don't know what happened to him. Sheikh Ibrahim al-Mali. Sheikh Ibrahim was from Mali in West Africa. I mean, this man, subhanallah, he would come into the masjid of Al-Azhar. You don't teach in the masjid of Al-Azhar unless you've been approved by like the scholars of Al-Azhar, right? So he's teaching in there, and he just comes in with a simple thobe, sandals, thobe, just sit down in the courtyard. He wouldn't usually teach in the main rooms because he's like younger. It's for the bigger scholars, they can have the main rooms. He would just sit kind of in the courtyard. Students would come, they would come around him, and he would just sit down. And they'd bring all their texts, their books, whatever they're studying, and he'd just sit there, and they'd just start reading, and he'd correct them from his memory. He memorized everything, right? Memorized everything. All of the books of the Maliki school, all of the Quran, the hadith, everything you can think of, right? So they sit down and they read to him, he corrects from his memory. He'll tell them, no, that's not the right way, this is the right way, this is so-and-so says about it here, this, so-and-so says about it here. And then the lesson would finish, he'd just get up and walk out. Some of the brothers, they asked him, like, do you miss your country? Do you miss your... He's like, yeah, I miss the sheep. I miss the goats. And then at the same time, memorize the most complicated text of law and of finance and all of these kind of things, right? But the lifestyle of the person is so simple because they don't care for that stuff, right? And the Prophet ﷺ, he gave us so many examples of his teachings. Again, you have to straddle this paradox. As we'll see it all the time in our religion, is there's always this paradox. But how do you straddle the paradox of being dedicated to learning and really loving it and caring about it, and at the same time being very simple? Right? There's a little bit of a paradox in that, because a lot of times you see people who are extremely dedicated to learning and very intellectually driven, and they're not simple, right? Like every conversation you have with them is complex, it's tiring. There's a little bit of exhaustion involved in every conversation, and like because they just can't turn it off, right? But that's not the way that it always was. And the examples of these hadith that the Prophet ﷺ gives us, he gives us so many examples of statements that are really simple, but they're extremely profound. And again, the people of knowledge and practice, they understood that. So that's why Imam an-Nawawi rahimahullah will tell you in the 40 hadith, he tells us in the beginning of his 40 hadith collection, that I'm putting these hadith here and I've chosen them because every single one of them is a foundational text of the religion. It's going to give you a lot. There's a lot in it, but it's just 40. You can sit down and read it. It's going to take you not very long, a couple, 15, 20, 30 minutes if you just read the text. But you're going to get so much of what you need there. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, one of the ways that he's described and that he described himself ﷺ, is that he has jawami' al-kalim, that he has speech that's really concise, but it conveys a huge amount of knowledge and a huge amount of information. So for example, one of them that comes to mind is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he said, and this one's in the 40 hadith, that he said, ittaqullaha haythuma kunt. Have taqwa of Allah wherever you are. وَأَتْبِعِ سَيِّئَةً حَسَنَةً تَمْحُهَا. That if you follow a bad deed, Have taqwa wherever you go, and follow a bad deed with a good deed, it will erase it. وَخَالِقِ النَّاسِ بِخُلُقٍ حَسَنٍ. And deal with people with good character. It's a really simple advice, and it could take your whole life. Have taqwa wherever you are. Every single situation, have taqwa. And if you do something bad, follow it up with something good. One of the things that I think is really interesting about this hadith is that it's very proactive. Sometimes when we make a mistake or we do something we're not supposed to do, we tend to wallow in despair. We just kind of like shut it down. It's done. Everything's over. I can't do anything good in my whole life. I'm so useless. We just shut the whole thing down for various reasons. Usually that's something that we've been trained into at some level. But the Prophet ﷺ here is saying, if you did something, if you made a mistake, just follow it with something that's right. Just do what's right afterwards. It's going to get rid of it. And if you get rid of it and you keep on moving, then you keep on moving, and there's benefit in that. And then deal with people with good character. These are things that you can't miss on them. If you have taqwa, you do good deeds. When you make a mistake, you make up for it. You acknowledge that you made a mistake. You make up for it. You do something good. Deal with people in good character. All of it's going to go away. And these are the simple but profound teachings of the Prophet ﷺ. So sometimes I think it's important for us to remind ourselves of these things, that we should actually keep it simple. Yes, seek the answers, seek the knowledge, seek the learning. But sometimes we have to think about okay, this is the learning that I'm trying to accomplish, and this is the way that I'm trying to be. And these things that I'm trying to be or I'm trying to do are a lot more simple. And I'm just doing my best. And yeah, I'm going to study all of these things, but then I'm going to come out and I'm going to deal with the people, and I'm going to try to maintain their rights and take care of them and treat them properly, and treat the young with mercy and treat the elderly with reverence, and give the deference to the people of knowledge, and so on and so forth. The basic things of the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So I want to just to bring that forward, and then in the second half of the khutbah I'll talk about some in particular. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسولنا وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. عباد الله أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله. I remind myself and everyone to have God consciousness and awareness and reverence in all affairs. Inshallah, ameen. So one of the ways that we can do this, and I've said this many times, may Allah help us to practice it, myself included. It's very, very important that we have some sort of regular connection with the basic teachings of Islam. It's not always about hearing something new, right? Like our religion and our practice of our religion is not some sort of entrepreneurial adventure that it always has to be growing, and there always has to be something new, and it has to be like this new innovation that's making everyone excited. And how are we going to scale our relationship with God and all of this kind of stuff? It doesn't have to go that way, right? It's like, do I believe in Allah? Am I getting anything out of my salat? Because if I'm not getting anything out of my salat, I have to actually ask the question of is my heart present? Do I have Allah in my heart? Is there some sort of, metaphorically obviously, do I have some sort of relationship with God that's alive? Or is it just, I'm just going through the motions, right? And so we put this effort in, and we try to do it day in and day out, over and over again. And over again with time, then we build that quality of faith, inshallah, through that repetition. So the Prophet ﷺ, his example is very profound. And there's so many sides of it. And one of the things that we can do, again, to have that regular relationship, and I think this is a good practice for Muslim families in general, is that you can take a book like the 40 Hadith of An-Nawawi, take a book like the Riyadh al-Salihin, also collected by An-Nawawi, Gardens of the Righteous, and make sure you have that book in your house. When you pray together as a family, sit down afterwards, read a couple of Hadith. We used to do this more when I was in college. It was wonderful. When I was an undergrad, I lived with the brothers. We had the Riyadh al-Salihin right next to the place where we would pray in the apartment. And every time when we would go to pray, and after we pray, whoever led the salat would turn around and they read a couple of hadith, and over the course of a year or 2 years, you finish a lot of the text. And you might go and you might do it again, and you might do it again, and that's okay. because I should have a deep level of familiarity with the example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that book's going to tell you all of the issues of the heart. It's going to tell you all the hadith related to the issues of the heart. It's going to tell you all of the issues, things you should do, things you shouldn't do, the kind of manners you have when you visit people, different dua that you can make. And if you have any questions or things that don't make sense, alhamdulillah, you're part of the IOK community. You can come to any of the mashayikh here and ask them, I came across this hadith, we came across this hadith as a family. And as you start to ask those questions, you develop your capacity to understand and to read, and you have that relationship. So, and then it becomes the baseline of the culture of the family and the household and the community, right? Because in the end, the baseline of the culture of the Muslims is the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We talk a lot about how Islam lends itself to being able to bring in various cultural expressions, and it's not culturally predatorial and stuff like this. But in the end, there is a culture to Islam, and the foundation of what comes together is in the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Regardless of where you go around the world, you might have some differences in the flavor of the food and the color of the clothes and the way that people speak to each other, stuff like that. But the unifying point will always be in the example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The dua to enter the masjid will always be the dua to enter the masjid. The dua when you leave the restroom will always be the dua when you leave the restroom. The foot that you walk in, the foot that you walk out, the thing that you say when you ride your car or your animal, all of those are going to be unified because all of them find their base in the example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we should build that example. In closing, I just want to share this line of poetry. I'll call it poetry from a modern American poet named Brother Ali. And he has these lines in the beginning of one of his works. And they're a summary of some of the teachings of Imam W.D. Muhammad, rahimahullah ta'ala, one of the great leaders of Islam in America in the recent times. And may Allah have mercy on him and elevate his rank. And so the poet, he put these simple teachings that he used to teach the people that followed him, he put these into like a lyrical form, and says the following. Think about these points. This is very much like, it's very comprehensive for what is the message of Islam. Practically speaking, like I have a job, I have things that are occupying me. What are the things that I can focus on? Okay, if I'm going to take a few things and focus on them, what are they? He said, faith in God, high thinking, simple living. So we talked about, you believe in God, high thinking, simple living. You think, again, the same thing we were just talking about in the khutbah. Work hard, deep love, no conditions. So you work hard. Whatever it is you're doing, work hard. Do it right. Do it properly. Something that I'm worried about with a lot of young people now. And that was standard for us when we were growing up. If you're going to do something, you do it right. And you do it properly. And you do it the way that it's supposed to be done. You don't leave the ends loose. You don't skip corners, cut corners and stuff like that, right? Do it properly. Work hard, deep love, no conditions. We love deeply. Really care for people, which is hard because there's a vulnerability in that. Gentle heart, head level, clear vision. Gentle heart, head level, clear vision. So the heart is not only deeply loving, but it's also gentle. It's soft with the people. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna rifqa la yukunu fi shay'in illa zana, wa la yunza'u min shay'in illa shana." The gentleness is not added to anything except that it makes it beautiful, and it's not taken from anything except that it tarnishes it. So he said, gentle heart, head level, level-headed. Not just losing their cool all the time, can't engage in anything. Allah help us. Clear vision, back tall, firm in our conviction. Back tall, firm in our conviction. Again, I'll read it and we'll close. Faith in God, high thinking, simple living, work hard, deep love, no conditions. Gentle heart, head level, clear vision, back tall, firm in our conviction. This is a good summary of the example of the Prophet ﷺ. We ask Allah to give us the company of His beloved in this life and the next. We ask Allah to give us the good deeds that will benefit us.